Baldur's Gate 3 is shaping up to be a massive RPG, but you'll make one of the most important choices at the start of the game when you create your character and pick your class. I'll run down all 12 classes in this video so you can already pick which one is the best for you. Now, because Baldur's Gate is a pretty complex game, it might be smart to start with a more straightforward class. And in my opinion, the best pick for that is the Barbarian. This raging brute is built to run headfirst into danger, and to help with that, it has the highest starting HP and hit point gain per level in the entire game. They can use any type of weapon and have a special ability called Rage that makes them even more dangerous. When you activate Rage, your attacks deal more damage and you yourself take less damage from physical attacks. Rage will drop if you don't hit or get hit during a turn, so you want to make sure that you are always on the front line. At later levels, you even gain the ability to perform more than one attack per turn and an increase to your movement range, so if a powerful and tanky frontliner is what you are looking for, then the Barbarian is the class for you. If you'd rather spice up the frontline with some magic, then look no further than the Paladin. While they can equip any type of weapon or armor, they also have access to spells and some class-specific magical abilities. One of these is Lay on Hands, an incredibly useful ability that lets you either heal yourself or an ally or cure them of any poison or disease affecting them. But the Paladin's most iconic ability is definitely Divine Smite, which lets you imbue your weapon strikes with holy light. While this expands a spell slot, a resource you also need to cast your other spells, it significantly increases the damage of an attack, even more so if your target is an undead or fiend. So like Barbarians, Paladins are very tanky but can also deal a lot of damage and can even add a little bit of support with Lay on Hands and spells like Bless, which increase hit chance from multiple allies at a time. You can lean even more into support or damage with one of the 4 available subclasses. Now, I'm not going to go over all of these as there are 46 of them across all classes combined, but the Paladin in specific has a really cool one that is unlocked through gameplay. If you break the sacred oaths of your Paladin order by making certain choices in key moments, you become an Oathbreaker, which gives you access to completely new abilities that can control undead or frighten nearby enemies. And by the way, if you liked the video so far, it would be awesome if you could leave a like, as that helps the channel out, and subscribe for more videos on Baldur's Gate 3 and other upcoming RPGs. Now, we've covered 2 close range classes, but if you'd rather fight your battles from afar, then the Bard is an excellent pick. They have access to a wide range of spells, and while they are not the strongest damage dealers, they have a lot of tools to help them manipulate their opponents. From making them fall asleep to making them burst into uncontrollable laughter, Bard offers some of the strongest crowd control options in the game. And this versatility even extends outside of combat, as spells like Speak with Animals can present you with some unexpected opportunities, like potentially recruiting a dog for at your camp. Next to a wide variety of spells, the Bard also has a unique class mechanic called Bardic Inspiration. You can give a charge of Bardic Inspiration to an ally, which they can then expend on an attack, saving throw, or an ability check to make success more likely. Which again makes the Bard versatile both inside and out of combat, as Inspiration can be used to help an ally get the final hit on an enemy or help you succeed on an important roll during a dialogue to get the desired outcome. And while Bards offer some amazingly versatile spells, if you really want to go all out on magic, then you might want to start as a wizard. Now, fair warning, as a wizard you have very little in the way of hit points, armor and available weapons, meaning you are very reliant on your magic. Luckily, you also have the most expansive spell list in the game, so as long as you don't get hit, you can unleash some absolute mayhem. You have tons of different damage spells, you can buff yourself or your allies, debuff enemies, or even control the battlefield by summoning fog clouds or dropping pools of grease. And to add to this versatility, the wizard also has the most available subclasses, with each of them being focused on empowering a specific school of magic. Want to raise an army of undead? Pick School of Necromancy. Rather focus on protective magic and barriers? School of Abjuration has got you covered. So while the list of spells and options might seem intimidating, the wizard is pretty much only limited by your creativity. Well, that and the low hit points of course, but we can work with those. Before we get to the next class, I want to touch on your stats real quick, because the 6 main stats of Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Wisdom, Intelligence and Charisma are very important in deciding what your character is good at, both in and out of combat, meaning that different classes benefit from different stats. Want a burly barbarian who can hit hard and tank hits? Invest in Strength and Constitution. Want a bard who can talk his way out of any situation? Better make make sure you get your charisma as high as possible. Different classes of spellcasters also scale with different stats, so wizard spells become stronger with intelligence, whereas bards and paladins fuel their magic with the charisma stat. So make sure you check which stats are recommended in character creation and pick accordingly. Race also comes into play, as they all give bonuses to different stats as well, meaning that dwarves are better suited to be warriors thanks to their high constitution, whereas wood elves have a bonus to dexterity and wisdom that makes them excellent rangers. And speaking of those, if you want to play a less squishy class that can still cast spells, then you might want to consider a ranger. Like paladins, rangers mix spellcasting with martial expertise, meaning they are not as limited in their choice of weapons and armor as some other spellcasters. Obviously, most of the ranger spells are nature themed, like ensnaring strike and animal friendship, and you gain some benefits depending on your favorite terrain and targets too. So for instance, if you decide during character creation that your ranger specifically hunts creatures from other planes of existence, you gain access to the protection from good and evil spell. You can then also decide they grew up in a cold wasteland, which gives them resistance to cold damage from any freezing spells or effects. There are multiple enemy types and trains you can pick, including ones that give you access to heavy armor, so you can build your ranger to fit many different roles. And if you want, you can even double the trouble and add a beast companion by picking the Beastmaster subclass when you hit level 3. And I want to clarify this a little bit, as not each class will unlock their subclass at the same level. Level 3 is the absolute latest you get it, but some classes like Warlock pick theirs straight away at character creation. Warlocks gain their magical powers from striking a deal with a powerful being like an archfey or a demonic fiend, and they're a bit of an old one when it comes to spellcasters. For starters, they have access to Eldritch Invocations. These are a set of passive buffs that you can pick a couple from, which either buff and modify existing spells or give you access to completely new ones without the need to spend a spell slot on them. As I mentioned earlier, spell slots are the resource required to cast spells, and warlocks are a bit unique in that regard as well. To keep it simple, you have less spell slots than other spellcasters, but they are easier for you to get back. So where a wizard wants to hang onto a spell slot for a powerful fireball spell at the end of a dungeon, a warlock can use a spell of choice in any battle and then get that resource back right in time for the boss. So while they're not the most versatile of casters, warlocks definitely have some unique mechanics to them, and knowing Larian, I would not be surprised if that powerful being you made a pact with shows up somewhere in the story. If you'd rather steer clear of any magical influences, then there are still tons of great choices. Rogues are obviously well suited for a mobile and highly damaging playstyle, although that does require some help from the rest of your party. The rogue's main trick is sneak attack, which deals more damage than a regular attack, but it can only be performed under one of two circumstances. The easy one is if there is an ally close to the target you are trying to sneak attack, which is where the rest of your party comes in. Alternatively, you can perform sneak attack if you have advantage on the attack, which can be triggered by various sources, such as the guiding bolt spell, but it's usually harder to trigger than just having an ally nearby. It's very important to make the most of this mechanic though, even more so as you level up and the damage of your sneak attacks increases. To compensate for this high damage output, rogues have a lower health pool than barbarians and paladins, but they are very slippery. Where other classes need to forfeit an attack to safely disengage and run away from an enemy without being hit in the back, rogues can use a cunning action to run in, stab an enemy, and still safely get out. The same principle applies to movement, where a rogue can double their effective range without losing an attack, so it's super easy to close the gap to enemies too. But of course, your favorite way of fighting might be head-on without all the running around. Well, then you still have an excellent choice next to the barbarian, that being the fighter. These are your masters at arms, proficient with any weapon and any type of armor, and you even get to pick a fighting style to specialize in things like archery or two-handed weapons. These tough warriors can keep themselves up during a fight with their self-heal ability Second Wind, but their most devastating ability is Action Surge. Now normally a character only has one action per turn, which you can use for major things like casting a spell or using an attack. But with Action Surge, a fighter can use two actions in the same turn. Pair that with the fact that at level 5 a fighter performs 2 attacks at the cost of 1 action, and it means you can unleash 4 attacks in a single turn at that point. Most classes can only ever do 1 and some of them 2, so having 4 is a major increase in damage. It is a limited use ability though, so like spells for casters, you have to decide the right moment for it. And speaking of magic, if you like like the idea of a magical swordsman, then the Eldritch Knight subclass also gives your fighter access to a limited list of spells. You can also play the other way around and make a caster that can also engage in some melee combat from time to time. A great pick for this is the Druid, who has access to a large array of nature-themed spells. Next to wizards, sorcerers and clerics, which I'll get to in a bit, druids are probably one of the most versatile casters in the game, with a large variety of damage, support and crowd control spells at their disposal. But what really makes them unique is their ability to wild shape into a variety of creatures, with the list expanding the more levels you get. So you can be casting spells 1 second, then turn into a bear and charge at your enemies the next. The best part is that the hit points of this beast form are separate from your own, meaning that if you turn into a bear, you gain a new pool of hit points for your bear form. Once those hit 0, you transform back into your regular form with all the hit points you had before shapeshifting. So on top of being versatile casters, druids are surprisingly tanky as well. And while they are definitely not as survivable, sorcerers are very powerful magic users too. Magic runs in their blood, whether that be due to a connection to a powerful dragon or an uncontrollable force of chaos that's stuck inside you. This gives sorcerers greater control over their magic than other classes, which manifests itself in the form of sorcery points. These can be used to modify any spell in your arsenal. You can increase the range, increase the duration, or even add a second target to a normally single target spell like Witch Bolt. Sorcerers have a lot of different spells to choose from as well, including a lot of powerful damage spells, and they also have one of the most interesting subclasses in the game. If you pick Wild Magic as the source of your power, then each spell you cast will have a small chance of triggering an additional magical effect that can range from being very helpful, not helpful at all, or sometimes even harmful. You might not always get what you want, but it's sure to spice up your playthrough in one way or another. So the Sorcerer offers you many ways of blowing your enemies to bits, but sometimes you want someone with the right spells to keep your party alive. The perfect class for this job is the Cleric, who has an amazing array of heals and buffs to survive even the toughest foes. Don't underestimate their ability to deal damage though, as spells like Guiding Bolt can help them deal some serious hurt too. And like wizards, clerics have many different subclasses to choose from, each of them tied to the ideals of a deity, like the domain of knowledge or the domain of life. All of these also expand your spell list with new spells, but a thing all clerics have in common is that they are especially adept at dealing with undead enemies. Their unique class ability, Turn Undead, can be used to make undead enemies around the cleric flee in fear, and at later levels these enemies will also receive a massive burst of damage when fleeing. So while it is the ultimate support, a cleric can do much more and is a valuable addition to pretty much any party. To round out the roster, we have the martial arts expert of the bunch, the Monk. There's a little bit less information on this one, as it's the only class that wasn't available in the early access build, but from what we've seen, it looks like an absolute powerhouse. Like the Rogue, it's more of a dexterous fighter, but it has access to a unique resource known as Ki that it can use to fuel various abilities. You can unleash a flurry of punches for high damage, or catch incoming projectiles like arrows and throw them back at your enemies. Your overall damage output is also very high, as you have the ability to follow up any regular weapon attack with an unarmed strike, which will deal even more damage if you get to higher levels. And there are some really cool subclasses to pick from here as well, including one that literally turns you into the Avatar and grants you mastery over the elements. So as you can see, your choices are very varied, but on top of that, there is also a lot of flexibility to the system thanks to multiclassing. Anytime you level up, you get the ability to pick a level in a different class instead. You can then continue leveling that class, or only take a few levels in your second class and spend the rest on your main, but since each level in one class means you're losing out on benefits from another, you have to think hard about which abilities work well together to complete your build. Either way, with 46 subclasses to mix and match as you see fit, the possibilities here are pretty much endless. Let us know which class you'll be picking up when the game releases, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe for more content on big upcoming RPGs, and if you want, you can watch our previous video on all the big games still coming out in 2023. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.